When you play Outlast, there's this constant feeling of anxiety. Despite getting a kick of sorts from the playthrough as fans of the horror media, there's always this looming, uncomfortable feeling in your gut. The feeling that tells you to close the game. Why bother traversing through this hell of a place? The place that makes you feel dread and even annoyance at times. Yet there you are, barely keeping yourself from exiting, delving into the madness. What is it about Outlast that makes it so uneasy to play? What makes Outlast easily uneasy?
All Outlast wants is to make it impossible for you to sit right in your seat.
In a game, let us suppose we are dropped in a post-apocalyptic world infested with zombies. What would we do? I'd personally look for some weapons and start exploring to find an objective. Now, let us suppose in a game we are dropped in a world where we are supposed to save the president's daughter from a mind-controlled cult infested by some parasite. What would we do? Okay, sure. Understandable. Look for a gun and start exploring to get to the next objective, right? Well, last time I promise. Let's suppose in a game we are dropped with a squad in a world where 19 other squads are dropped. 20 squads, but one winner. Do or die. What do we do? Well, I have no psychic powers, but I hear you say find some weapons and explore to find another squad to fight, or to find a hiding spot if you're the camper kind. So the answer in most games is get weapon, explore, and so on. The tables get turned in Outlast's approach, where not only do we not have the weapons, which I'm sure everyone has talked about to death, but we cannot explore for the anxiety of it is too high. From the moment we step foot into Mount Massive Asylum, to the end, start to finish, it is unknown territory. What I mean is if we try to familiarize ourselves with the map or the layout of the room we are in, like we do in any other game, we are very likely to find ourselves a pursuer instead. And the music starts, along with it, the tension rises. We don't even know it, but our heartbeat is doing heavy workout at this point. And our brain is in visceral mode instead of thinking intellectually about ways to deal with the enemy. Finally, somehow, we find a locker to hide in and the pursuer is off. Now, would we want to redo the terrifying exercise again to explore the layout of the map, or would we rather just look for the exit and get the hell out of the said area? Most people, including me, would choose the latter to avoid the aforementioned tension, hence leading to a state of vaguely knowing the layout of the map for us to get to the next point, but not intricately enough to be so confident as to juke enemies around and have a fun time doing it. The unknown layout as a result leads to a constant mental tension of potentially getting caught and killed. The music, meanwhile, 10x's the terror. There are two layers to the audio-induced terror in Outlast: the music and the signature sound effects. The music is the most apparent and prominent layer, I'm sure you guys notice it too, while the other one, subtle, yes, but still emits probably a stronger sense of uneasiness into the game. Let us talk about them one by one. The music by itself is so messed up, good, that if by some bug the intense chase music plays and no one is there, your heart starts jumping out of its shell, because even if nothing visual is available to signal danger, your ears know better. I would expect nothing less, of course, from an OST that I feel is quite inspired by The Shining's music. Yes, The Shining. The audio creator Francis Bruce, in a 2020 interview done by Red Barrels themselves, answered the question, "What is your all-time favorite horror movie?" by saying, "Always has been, always will be, The Shining, hands down." So that kind of proves my point. And if you just give a listen to the OST of The Shining and the OST of this game side by side or one after another, yeah, there are quite a bit of similarities. Furthermore, when asked, is there a part of the audio creation or design process that you enjoy doing specifically for Outlast, he replied, all of it. I absolutely love being able to immerse the player into a madness. I enjoy the horror aspect and visceralness of Outlast. The asset creation, recording, design, and implementation are all aimed at making the player go through hell with us and enjoy the ride, so I love exploring the limits and finding new and fucked up ways of making the players feel uneasy. Hence, we can see that the music and audio design in general was fundamentally aimed at making the game feel visceral and uneasy, which it very much succeeds to do. Now for the secondary and my favorite layer of the audio of Outlast, the signature sound effects. Before making my point though, let's go through a short and interesting research. Ivan Pavlov, a scientist, through his experiments demonstrated that, I quote, dogs could be conditioned to salivate, which means to have a flow of saliva, especially in excess, in response to a variety of stimuli, including tones of music that had never been associated with food. During the conditioning or acquisition process, the researcher would present a neutral stimulus such as a musical tone shortly before placing food powder in the dog's mouth. The food powder would cause the dog to salivate. After pairing the tone and the food many times, usually 20 or more, Pavlov found that the tone alone would elicit salivation. Because dogs do not naturally salivate in response to musical tones, he concluded that this salivation was a learned response. Pavlov called the tone the learned or conditioned stimulus and the salivation to the tone the learned or conditioned response. Now, this theory is effective on humans too, and has been used to provide therapy and positively affect human life. Though Outlast uses the same psychological effect to produce anxiety before the tension actually comes. Just like a dog salivates when food is placed in its mouth, that is a natural response to food, we humans are startled by loud noises produced during the chase sequences of Outlast. It is just our nature. But like the dog starts salivating to the tone of music, when he hears it paired with the food following shortly after repeatedly, we humans also have this thing. The game, in case of main enemies, presents us with a signature sound effect before we encounter the said enemy who will probably chase us soon, lending to the tension in our brain. Hence, our brain links these signature sounds like Chris's chains, man-eater's handsaw, or Traeger's scissors with the anxious situation about to come. So we're about to deal with these enemies, and these sounds are like an indicator that the enemies are coming. So with the sounds only, we are terrified. These sounds terrifyingly act as an alarm to our brain, just like the tone alarms the dog that something is coming. Fortunately for the dog, it's food, but for us, playing Outlast, it's chain-bearing, handsaw-wielding, scissor-using maniacs. These sounds are the messenger of the approaching threat and are truly an unnerving addition to the game on their own, in addition to the music being top tier. The enemies of this game are unlike most other games. They are equivalent yet varied. Each enemy, almost, is just as scary as the other one. Sure, Chris or Traeger might feel like a more substantial threat due to the visual appearance or maybe less hits to kill you attribute, but even if, let's say, in an area Chris is replaced by a standard variant, the footsteps of the player would be just as calculated and careful as they would be if Chris was there. Now, in a game like Resident Evil 2 Remake, if we were to replace Mr. X with a regular zombie, it would be a joke and a disaster to the tension the game builds with the presence of Mr. X, who's basically an invincible character whose footsteps are nightmare fuel. Though the same works in Outlast's case because no option to attack makes each individual enemy just as power bearing as the other. So basically, you'll never be like, finally Chris is off me so I can chill for a bit because I only have to fight the easy vanilla variant now. Yes, lack of enemy variety could be seen in a negative lens, but the game gracefully tackles that. It does not let it become a limiting factor. The enemies don't feel boring and same due to their distinct personalities. The mental pressure they induce on the in-game character and us as the players varies greatly. Chris, for instance, just wants to call you little pig and snatch your head off your body for some damn reason and follows you throughout the facility for it. Even if you don't know what reason, this guy scares everybody shitless. Traeger wants to be a doctor putting practice before theory and wants you to partake in his operations along with other patients, quote-unquote, of his. And Glaskian wants to make you his lovely bride. The dialogue pairings or voice lines, that follow these agendas and showcase to the player the terrible end goals of these characters, they're just freaky and tension building.
When I was a boy, my mother often said to me, "Get married, son, and see how happy you will be." I have looked all over, but no girlie can I find who seems to be just like the little girl I have in mind. I will have to look around until the right one I have found.
This variety of goals of theirs, along with no such thing as an easy enemy, makes you feel you're always on your toes and adds tension to the moment-to-moment gameplay, making a healthy piece of the pie in making Outlast uneasy. These people in this scary ass place, of course they're evil. They're predators. Or are they? Are they all just praise of their own stories? The physical and mental state of these patients does, if only subconsciously, indicate to us, the players, that these people are suffering what the experiments incur. Even if they feel like predators, they just might be prey. Their innocence and all sense being snatched away from them through whatever the hell is happening in this asylum. Being surrounded by such people, we don't only feel the antagonizing terror they induce while chasing us or being on the offense, but we also feel the subtler depression and hopelessness they are enduring, which is a hole our character must not fall into in order to get out of this hell. Who's there? Who's there? I'll hurt you. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of anything. Not anymore. The patients seem to have adopted the psychology of be the predator or be preyed upon. The game gives us reminders about this fact that it's not only us who's suffering in this environment, but nobody chose this. I hope you don't indulge in the vanity of self-pity, the fear that your suffering is more than others. We all must endure this. I remember feeling a weird void after Chris's death. Like, what the hell, am I right? After knowing the story to the best of my ability, this last playthrough was my best story playthrough so far. Having read so many journal and note entries and having watched a few video essays on the game, I genuinely felt empty and bad for this guy. He definitely was bad by his actions, but his heart was in the right place. His way of eliminating the suffering of the patients and any inhabitants of this place was to eliminate them.
The real, true victims of this game are the inmates, the prisoners who were subjected to endless pain and torment. Miles really was just a drop in the bucket when it came to helpless people at Mount Massive. As soapboxy as it is to say, the villain of this game was the big corporation trying to make a profit on innocents' suffering.
So as much as we hate these prisoners for chasing a rear end, the big bad guy for snatching a head away from the rest of the body, the man-eater for trying to slice us up with his awful sounding tool, and Mr. Gluskin for sincerely wanting to make us his bride, they are all inherently innocent. Their innocence brutally snatched away from them by the filthy mission of an ill-aligned corporation. The uncertainty and the mental dilemma of whether a player should treat them as predator or prey is an anxiety-provoking experience. Even though Outlast is a work of fiction, the themes and depictions it deals with are quite close to our real world. The themes of corporate greed and depictions of the people suffering from the said greed are eerily realistic. Seeing the deformed, stitched faces or bodies makes us feel scared initially, but soon for most of us comes a hard-hitting empathy. This empathy, which might arise subconsciously from the fact that we could suffer or go through the same disease, attack, fate as them tomorrow. After all, we've seen people suffering in real life. We've seen real acid attack survivors in the media or in real life, or people suffering from various cancers or other illnesses that leave their mark on the body in the form of deformities. Seeing similarly suffering people in a game slowly but surely builds up a strong sense of uneasiness. Things that make us uneasy and terrify us in real life, depictions of them unsettle us just the same. The visuals that start by upsetting us or scaring us end up pulling some heartstrings by the end. We're not terrified by the visuals of the depiction, but the deeper inner layer that similar things happen in real life, and we or our loved ones who are just as normal as these guys were before the evil took over could suffer a similarly terrifying fate anytime. Us, we can, our loved ones can. In addition to that, the environment excellently complements the story realistically. The possibility of infection and disease with the bodies, blood, insects, flies, and smell that must accompany it, which we cannot but our characters can feel, make the place, to say the least, non-residential. No corner of this whole asylum is free from blood or bodies or some type of repulsive substance that makes the real us feel uneasy and to question ourselves, why am I in this environment, even if for a game? Closely relating to the reality versus fiction point, the story of Outlast and the theme of corporate greed portrays a picture of the real world. Behind the facade of the noblest of causes, there might be the evilest of people. You might consider these evil things to be corporations like Facebook, or people feeling like superheroes and turning out to be someone else like Homelander, or maybe the recent Mr. Beast revelations, which are saddening. We didn't choose this. Why should we have to pay for it? Why do we have to die? Walker will kill us all just for being sick. We are still people. We didn't choose this. Cute. The profit potential of Project Wallrider remains staggeringly high. Cute. Family and government interest in the patients is so low as to make any chance of legal actions vanishingly unlikely. Tormenting a very niche, vulnerable group of criminally insane psychiatric patients for the purposes of making money, when you know there's very little attention given to them by their families and the government, is pure evil. An asylum for the criminally insane is a place where nobody wants to be, apparent by the cries and squeals of the patients. Being stuck in a closed-off one where nothing is operating is a location set wisely by the game devs. Such facilities are very much negatively perceived by us humans. The notation connected to them makes it very hard to accept for us or to care about what goes on the inside of these places.
I had to burn it. All of it. Murkoff took so much from us. Used us. Turned us into these things because nobody cares about a few forgotten lunatics. So let it burn. Burn the whole goddamn thing down.
The environment, music, story, mechanics, and enemies all hold the crucial keys to Outlast's success. The visceralness of Outlast arises from its non-residable environment from where you want to run. Unbearable yet charming music, which you only want to hear, if ever, outside of the game. Unrealistically realistic story, panic-inducing powerlessness, and battery-bound camera life, head-plucking, finger-snatching, buzzsaw revving, bride-making machines for enemies. Those are the ingredients of Outlast and the things that make Outlast easily uneasy.